The camera rolls. The lights blaze white, slicing straight through the congressional hearing table. At the center of the frame sits an older man, face, flushed red hand slamming the desk. His voice erupts, booming, cracking through the thick tension in the air. "I will not allow you to continue questioning me like this." This wasn't the tone of a man defending a point. It was the scream of someone unraveling. Chief Justice John Roberts, the living emblem of old guard authority, had just lost his composure on national television. Millions of viewers held their breath. But only one person didn't flinch. Jasmine Crockett. She didn't stand. Didn't respond. She simply stared, not with anger, not with fear, but like someone watching an ancient pillar of power fracture, piece by piece. The camera cut wide. The entire hearing room froze. Senators who normally bickered and barked were now silent, their eyes darting, searching. Everyone waited for Jasmine Crockett to respond. But she didn't rush. And even for those watching with no idea what came before, they couldn't look away. Because they knew this wasn't a hearing. This was a battle between a past screaming to survive and a present that simply stared back, waiting to strike. Before the scream, before that frozen glare stopped the nation, you need to know who sat on the other side of the table. John Roberts, Chief Justice, the head of the United States Supreme Court. A man who could make veteran senators blink. For over 2 decades, he was the face of an old judicial order, silent, composed, untouchable. No arguments, no questions, just rulings. And heads bowed. Roberts didn't yell. He didn't need to, because Washington had long learned to obey even his quietest nod. Until one woman didn't bow. Jasmine Crockett wasn't the name the conservative establishment wanted at that table. She didn't come to be polite. She came to dissect truth, no matter who sat across. And that Roberts had never prepared for. He was used to rehearsed questions, to hearings scripted for optics, to praise dressed up as neutrality. But Jasmine didn't read the script. She brought something into that hearing the old guard couldn't contain. Truth with no leash. A voice that didn't ask permission. A confrontation he never trained for. And that's why the man who once embodied order became the first to shatter it. Whispers in the halls of power, private jets, undisclosed vacations, billionaires dining with justices whose rulings made them richer. And one name kept surfacing in the shadows: Roberts. Until one committee finally moved, until one chair was placed in the middle of the fire, until one subpoena made its way to the Chief Justice. And Jasmine Crockett, she was already waiting. The hearing wasn't supposed to be this big. It wasn't meant to be televised. But something shifted, because this wasn't just oversight. This was a reckoning. The people were watching, and Jasmine knew it. The moment Roberts entered, the air changed. He walked like a man used to silence, to reverence. But Jasmine didn't blink. She leaned in, not to whisper, but to speak clearly enough for history to hear. "Mr. Chief Justice, today we ask questions, not because we can, but because for too long, no one did." And the showdown began. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The real battle didn't begin with a shout. It began with a stare. Jasmine Crockett looked at him directly, not blinking, not shifting. Roberts adjusted his tie. He looked at everything but her. The nameplate, the microphone, the marble wall. Anywhere but the woman who dared to question him. She broke the silence with a tone clinical as a scalpel. "Chief Justice, can you confirm whether you disclosed the flight provided to you by Mr. Kelton on the 3rd of June of last year?" A pause, then a clearing of the throat. Roberts leaned forward. His voice was slow, too slow. "I believe that matter falls outside the scope of this committee's jurisdiction." Crockett didn't flinch. She asked again. Same tone, same wording. This time she added, "Because I have here the FAA records, the flight log, and the guest manifest." She slid the file across the table. Roberts didn't touch it. The room was ice. Cameras zoomed in, hands clenched under the desk. A conservative senator coughed loud, hoping to break the rhythm. Crockett didn't blink. She turned the page in front of her. "Chief Justice, do you recognize this photograph?" She held it up. A picture of Roberts smiling, glass in hand, seated on a luxury yacht. Beside him, Kelton, the very man, with active cases before the court. Roberts' jaw tightened, but still, he didn't answer. She continued. "Did you recuse yourself from Kelton v. SEC?" He spoke keener now. There was no formal conflict of interest filed. Crockett leaned in. "Sir, the conflict didn't need to be filed. It was photographed." Gasps. Journalists scribbled. Hashtags bloomed online. But Jasmine didn't smile. She wasn't done. Because this wasn't a victory. Not yet. This was just the first crack. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She raised her evidence. Each question came wrapped in fact. Each fact anchored in documentation. She moved methodically, like a surgeon tracing a nerve. Chief Justice, how many undisclosed meetings have you had with Mr. Kelton or his associates in the past 5 years? Roberts adjusted his glasses. That's a broad-framing congresswoman. She cut in, not rude, just absolute. Then let's be precise. I have calendar entries, visitor logs, phone records. Would you like to narrow it yourself? Another pause. More clearing throats. A different senator tried to interject. Madam Chair, I believe these questions. But the chairwoman held up her hand. Let the congresswoman continue. Crockett didn't turn. She already knew the room was watching. Chief Justice, can you explain why the name of your son appeared on a shadow PAC's disbursement list connected to the Judicial Integrity Project? Roberts leaned back. His lips parted, but no sound came. Because here's what no one had done before. They didn't ask him to defend the law. They asked him to defend himself. And that's where power trembles. She continued, voice calm as the strike of a gavel. Sir, if a judge in any lower court had this level of entanglement with billionaires, with political operatives, with pending litigants, would you call it improper? He didn't answer. She pressed, would you call it unethical? Still silence. Then she looked him straight in the eye. Would you call it justice? The room was breathless. This wasn't grandstanding. This was dismantling. Brick by brick, robe by robe, until the bench looked less like a throne and more like a seat that could be held accountable. Something cracked. Not in the evidence, not in the room, but in him. Roberts sat back, crossed his arms. His lips trembled, not from age but fury. You've made your point, Congresswoman, he growled. But this is a circus, and I will not be a part of it. Jasmine didn't move. He pointed across the table. This is not how justice is done. Then he stood. It was the worst mistake of his career, because the cameras didn't blink, and neither did she. She stayed seated, calm, measured, ready. Chief Justice, sit down. It wasn't a plea. It was a command. He hesitated, because for the first time he wasn't sure what power meant anymore. Sit down and answer. Because this isn't a courtroom where you control the rules. This is Congress. We write the rules. Roberts looked at the chairwoman. She nodded. Slowly, reluctantly, he sank back into his seat. The Titan had risen, only to be reminded he was mortal. And Crockett, she hadn't even raised her voice. Because when power screams, and truth whispers back, the whole world listens. Roberts sat seething, but then he smiled, a small, crooked smirk. Congresswoman Crockett, if you wish to speak of ethics, perhaps you'd like to explain this. He reached into his folder, pulled out a transcript. The room shifted. He handed it to the chairwoman. According to this audio file, you met with representatives of the American Legal Action Network the night before this hearing. He let the accusation hang, senators murmured. Pundits watching from studios leaned forward. Crockett tilted her head. She didn't blink. It continued. Is it ethical for you to coordinate questions with an advocacy group actively lobbying against this court? Gasps. Roberts had counterpunched, but Jasmine didn't flinch. She nodded at the chairwoman. Please play the full recording. The chairwoman pressed a button. Speakers came alive, and the voice of Jasmine Crockett filled the room. If you came here to influence my questions, leave. I don't work for you. I don't work for them. I work for the truth. And tomorrow I will ask questions no matter who they make uncomfortable, including you. The tape ended. The silence thundered. Jasmine looked at Roberts, then at the room. You brought that clip hoping it would bury me. But I planted it, because the truth always knows where it's going. The trap didn't catch her. It caught him, and now the world saw it. The room didn't move. Not a breath. Not a murmur. Jasmine Crockett sat back. Roberts stared forward. The tape still echoed in the bones of every person present. Not just because it cleared her name, but because it revealed something else. Intent. She hadn't reacted. She had predicted. She didn't survive the ambush. She built it. And Roberts, he had walked straight into her hands. A senator whispered to another he brought a bulletproof vest to a chess match. Crockett leaned forward one last time. Calm, controlled, unmistakable. Chief Justice, do you now understand why the people have lost faith in institutions? It's not because of partisanship, it's not because of chaos, it's because when confronted with questions, the powerful scream, and when given a mirror, they shatter it. You are not on trial today. But the idea that you are untouchable is. Roberts didn't answer, because there was no script left, no robe thick enough to shield him. Cameras zoomed in, his eyes drifted downward. This was not rage now. It was resignation. The gavel struck. The chairwoman nodded. This hearing is adjourned. But for millions watching, it wasn't over. It was just the beginning of what would come next. And Jasmine Crockett, she stood, straightened her notes, and walked out, not as a voice in the room, but as the echo that would not leave it. The hearing was over. But the headlines had just begun. Every network replayed the moment. Not the scream, not the tape, but the silence. The exact second John Roberts lost control of the room and Jasmine Crockett never had to raise her voice. Clips flooded social media. Chief Justice cornered. Congresswoman calmly dismantles supreme power. It wasn't outrage that spread. It was awe. Law schools debated it. Talk shows quoted it. 1,000 op-eds tried to explain what had happened. But one headline captured it best. America didn't witness a hearing. It witnessed a reckoning. The Supreme Court released a short statement. They would review internal ethics guidelines. A move so rare it made history. But Jasmine, she didn't gloat. She didn't tweet. She returned to her district, held a town hall, faced the people, because that's who she answered to. One woman asked her, "Weren't you scared?" Jasmine smiled. Scared of what? The truth. And the room erupted in applause. Not because they saw someone tear down power, but because they saw someone finally look it in the eye and not blink. The fallout wasn't just damage, it was transformation. Justice didn't change overnight. But from that day forward, it had a new definition. Not robes, not titles, but accountability whispered then demanded. Live in real time. And Jasmine Crockett. She wasn't a footnote. She was the author of a new chapter. Months passed, but the echo didn't fade. Lawmakers cited it. Advocacy groups studied it. Students reenacted it. The Crockett Doctrine, they started calling it. A style of inquiry that wasn't fire. It was ice. Controlled. Relentless. Rooted in record. Chief Justice Roberts didn't resign, but he withdrew. Fewer public appearances. No more speeches. A legacy now shadowed by silence. And Jasmine, she didn't change, because she didn't need to. She kept doing the work. Committee after committee, hearing after hearing. But something had shifted. When she spoke now, people listened like it mattered. Because it did. A freshman congresswoman had walked into a room built for kings, and reminded them all, this is a republic, not a monarchy. Power in America must speak. And when it doesn't, the people will find someone who will. The legacy wasn't a law, it wasn't a conviction, it was a truth. Proven, public, permanent. And Jasmine Crockett, she didn't end the system, she rebooted its spine, one question at a time. One silence cracked wide open, and with it, a country reminded that accountability doesn't shout. It sits quietly, prepared, and waits for its name to be called. Truth landed like lightning. But lightning, when it strikes power, always triggers thunder. The very next morning, an ethics complaint was filed. Not against Roberts, but against Jasmine Crockett. The charge: bringing disrepute to the judiciary. Cable news pundits lined up, not to discuss the corruption exposed, but whether Crockett had gone too far. The headlines twisted. Did she cross the line? Crockett versus Constitution. One network even ran a panel titled, "Should Congress members be allowed to grill justices?" Behind the scenes, legal foundations funded by Roberts' allies began circulating talking points. She's undermining confidence in the courts, they said. A formal motion was drafted to censure her. Anonymous sources leaked memos to smear her record. It wasn't just backlash. It was institutional recoil. Roberts himself remained silent. But the machine around him, that old polished machinery of unchecked power, came to life. They couldn't break her logic, so they went after her character. But Crockett didn't blink. She released no statement, held no press conference. Instead, she walked back into Congress the next day, head high, notes in hand, ready for the next hearing. Because while they weaponized fear, she carried proof. And in that silence you could feel it. They weren't trying to punish her, they were trying to warn the next one. They came for her. But they didn't realize she wasn't alone anymore. A coalition of young attorneys filed a counter-brief. Over 500 law students across the country walked out of class holding signs that read, "Ask better questions. Demand better answers." Civil rights groups flooded inboxes of the Judiciary Committee. Phone lines crashed under the weight of public support. Even former judges quietly but forcefully issued a letter, "When courage meets accountability, it should not be punished. It should be protected." Then came the petition, 5 million signatures. One demand passed the Judicial Integrity Act. It had stalled in committee for years, but now it had a face. Jasmine Crockett didn't start a movement, she revealed it. The hearings weren't just watched, they were believed. The people didn't rally for her personality. They rallied for her precision, for the way she made truth undeniable. On the anniversary of the hearing, she gave one speech. No podium, no fanfare, just a chair in the same hearing room. She looked around, then said, "I didn't come here to be feared. I came here to make sure fear never outranks the facts." She paused. Then close the folder. The robe will always mean something. But from now on, so will the record.